We're talking to Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of the United Nations Watch in Geneva. And Hillel, you were about to tell us before the break what you're hoping, what the best case scenario could be, what kind of reforms can be made to this Human Rights Council.
Well, unfortunately, it's a very pessimistic situation. The fact is that if you have rotten ingredients, you're going to get a rotten soup. And what we have is virtually 50% of the Human Rights Council are countries that are either repressive regimes or just fail to meet basic democratic standards. They're very powerful. They dominate the largest regional alliances, the African group, the Asian group. They're dominated by the Islamic countries like China and Cuba, communist tyrannies. And the result is just very bad for human rights. You know, whatever we try to do in the last session, and I mean NGOs that care about democracy like UN Watch and some of the Western democracies tried to pass certain things in the recent session, and the best they could get was 12 out of 47 votes, so they kept losing. The best you could get was Japan, Canada, EU, and affiliated countries when they stood up for freedom of speech, for example, on the Danish cartoons issue and so many other things. The best they could get was 12 out of 47 seats. So that's the reality, and we're going to continue struggling to make the best of this council because we have no other choice, but I think we have to be very realistic, and I'm concerned that too many groups have been whitewashing its deficiencies and its defects in order to present it as a butterfly when in fact it's still a caterpillar.
But you know what? As long as there are groups like yours, and as long as there are advocates like you, it's also our job here in the free world to help those leaders that understand that. And we've been encouraging people in this program to express their support for Prime Minister Harper's positions on the Middle East crisis, but also on his support for democracies in general. And between people like you giving out the information and having your voice heard, and with populations that can be stimulated to get active, to write, to support Western leaders, that fight has to be kept up.
Well, it is, and I think your show is doing a marvelous job, and I'll encourage our listeners that, you know, every voice counts, believe it or not, on our website, which is www.unwatch.org. Listeners can click and send a message to Kofi Annan about what the UN ought to do for democracy and what the UN ought to be doing for true peace in the Middle East and enforce its own resolutions. So the truth is everyone can and should do something, whether it's contacting their own member of parliament and prime minister, and we're certainly encouraged that Prime Minister Harper has been taking a very strong moral stand about the differences between democracy and terror organization, and has been unafraid to state the basic truth that until now we've seen, you know, a country that we have a lot to do with, that we have many similarities, which is Australia, just taking the lead on things. And Canada votes with Australia in many areas, but in other things was shying away, and we're seeing Prime Minister Harper joining that sort of willingness to speak out firmly in support of universal values.
You've raised a very important point that we underline to our listeners all the time. A politician, when they or when I say politician, I don't just mean an elected politician. Any public official, when they get one letter, they think that it stands for 100 people. And what Hillel Neuer is saying is true. Write. If you believe, then at least write. If you can't march, write. If you can't participate, write. They will listen to it. And support the work of UN Watch, and you can look at their work at unwatch.org. Hillel Neuer from Geneva, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.